Welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. I'm Dr. Daniel Amen.
And I'm Tana Amen. Here we teach you how to win the fight for your brain to defeat anxiety, depression, memory loss, ADHD, and addictions.
The Brain Warriors Way podcast is brought to you by Amen Clinics, where we've transformed lives for 3 decades using brain SPECT imaging to better target treatment and natural ways to heal the brain. For more information, visit amenclinics.com.
The Brain Warriors Way podcast is also brought to you by BrainMD, where we produce the highest quality nutraceutical products to support the health of your brain and body. For more information, visit brainmdhealth.com. Welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. And stay tuned for a special code for a discount to Amen Clinics for a full evaluation, as well as any of our supplements at brainmdhealth.com. So we are back, and I have a question. So have you ever, and I kind of know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyways for our audience. Have you ever known someone that you have to walk on eggshells all the time? Because I have, and it's really uncomfortable. But you are never sure what you're going to get when you walk in the door. You all the way home.
You're actually describing 20 years of my life.
So all the way home, you're worried. Because you're already setting up in your head how you're going to respond to something, what it might be. You're not exactly sure. You're thinking about how you're going to handle it. What are you going to say? It's very stressful. So, I know that you've experienced that. So I want to talk about what is going on in the brain, not only with the person that's happening with, but how do you handle that? It's really tough.
So I have often in my ADD writings talked about raising ADD children and being in an ADD marriage.
Right.
And one of the first things I learned, not only with my family, but with my patients, is people who have low activity in their prefrontal cortex are often excitement seeking. So that's sort of known in the ADD world. These are people who are more likely to jump out of an airplane,
right,
to race a car, to go to scary movies. But what a lot of people don't know is these are also people who not only are excitement seeking, they're conflict seeking. They play this game called Let's Have a Problem. Mm-hmm. And it's painful.
Oh my gosh.
Because if you're not conflict seeking, in fact, if you're a little bit like me and you tend to be conflict avoidant, that you don't really like confrontation, then finding yourself in that kind of family really unbalances you,
right,
that you don't like it and you're irritated, anxious a lot.
Right.
And one of my favorite stories about this is I saw this woman, Betty, one of my first patients when I opened our first Amen clinics in Northern California, and she was suicidal. And the reason I saw her was I was seeing her kids, and then I began to see her when she got really depressed. And for a year, every week, she comes into my office, sits on my couch, and tells me how she's going to kill herself.
Oh, wow.
In the most gruesome ways.
Oh, no.
And I'm always anxious. I'm always worried. I'm always signing suicide contracts with her. And then when I scanned her and I saw the low frontal lobe activity, I began to understand why she was doing that. She was doing it as a way to turn on her brain. And one day I looked at her and I said, you need to stop that.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So I don't recommend most psychiatrists do this to their suicidal patients. But I looked at her and I said, you're no more going to kill yourself than I am. You love your children. And by the way, if you kill yourself, you've just increased the chance they will kill themselves 500%. Growing up Roman Catholic, I had to pass guilt 101 and advanced guilt. And I'm not above using it with my patients. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, you are telling me these things and you have these bad thoughts as a stimulant. this is your way of stimulating yourself
So
that
my
you're
gosh.
treating your ADD. And when I treated her ADD, she stopped talking about suicide. And I mean, you have to be highly skilled to do this. I don't recommend it.
Yeah, don't do what I did.
Don't do it at home.
I had somebody threaten to commit suicide, and I thought they were being manipulative. And I'm like, well, then I'm going to call 911, and I'm never talking to you again because you are either manipulating me or you're serious, and either way, I'm not qualified to deal with you. So don't do that. But anyways, you just reminded me of my childhood, and I just got PTSD. My mother,
Who's terribly ADD.
oh my God.
And you're the one that told me you didn't believe in ADD our first date.
Totally did not believe in ADD. Totally. I met him and I'm like, it's an excuse to fail or not try. So I thought he was just like total nonsense. And then he like goes about it like, you're very sneaky. You go through the back door. You like start asking these questions instead. So instead of saying, oh, it's real and like trying to prove it to me, you just like start sneakily like asking questions. So like picking away. So tell me about how you get up at 4:00 in the morning and work out every day. Oh, so tell me about, so how much coffee do you drink before you work? And you work on a trauma unit. And I'm like, all of a sudden it occurred to me, I'm like, you think I'm ADD. So
Right, and your voice went up. You think I have ADD.
I was like really mad about it. But I have a very different.
Was I right?
Well, I have a very different. That's really important for us to distinguish here. I have a very different kind of ADD from my mother. Right, my mother is very classic of what you're talking about. She kind of needs a little bit of like drama going on and conflict in order to sort of like get herself going, I think. So she would always take me to horror flicks when I was little. There was always some sort of family conflict. Now, if you know my mom, she's amazing. She's an amazing human being. So this seems weird that she would do this, like she sort of needs this because she's this great person. But there's just always some kind of conflict or drama. Not so much now, but when I was growing up. But if you know me, I'm very anxious. So I don't like that. I have my own ways of stimulating myself through working out, through, I meditate, I do all these things. Yes, I drink coffee. Like I used to drink a lot of coffee. So now it's like less now that I know how it affects you. But I had a very different way of handling my life. So people like my mom, who I was used to, but didn't necessarily know how to deal with very effectively. And so
So what makes you think she has ADD? So she dropped out of school when she was 16.
Well, she came from a very abusive background.
Oh.
She had multiple, not
Because ADD usually comes from ADD, and there's a lot of impulse control
well,
issues,
she comes from
drug
a very
abuse.
poor, very, very poor. Lots of family dynamic issues. My mom didn't have minor head injuries. She had some multiple major head injuries.
I was actually going to say that. New study out today. Secondary attention deficit disorder in children and adolescents 5 to 10 years after they've had a traumatic brain injury.
Right.
So people who have a traumatic brain injury often have a significantly higher incidence of actually being diagnosed with ADD.
To anybody out there listening who's going, well, this sounds hopeless. No, I want to explain to you, my mom, she's a rock star. My mom is a rock star. When you think about where she came from, what she's been through, 16-year-old runaway, had no money, no education really, she is like very successful. Now, had she had this information sooner, it just would have been less
And
trauma.
in the next podcast, we're going to talk about, do you have ADD and how would you know?
Before we do that, I want to actually talk a little bit about what we started off with. So this conflict, when you walk in the house and there's eggshells, because maybe we need to continue it in the next podcast, but some people can leave. You could get divorced. I could get divorced. We can leave situations. Some people can't. Okay. There are children who are very anxious who don't have ADD, or maybe they've got a different kind of ADD, or maybe they're overly anxious, and they've got parents who are constantly causing conflict. What do you do?
Well, if you can, you get them help. That's the
But
first
if you're a
thing.
kid and you can't,
Then you don't pick up the rope. So having 3 children who have ADD, the little one was hyperactive. And I remember when she was like 18 months old, she'd run up and kick her brother.
if you know her, this is funny.
And if he didn't chase her, she would go run and kick him again. So she was totally stirring stuff up. I'm like, why do you want me to yell at you? And as children, they're often excitement seeking, conflict seeking, And I tell parents, don't be their stimulant. Every time you yell at them, you beat them, you belittle them, even though emotionally the children hate it, there's a part of their brain, the little dopamine part, that loves it. So I bet I can get you to yell at me. And when parents actually listen to me and they stop yelling at the child initially gets worse because they go, I know I can get you to yell at me, right? And it's completely unconscious. They never wake up in the morning, or at least mostly never, wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to make mommy cry. In fact, I'll often, when I listen to this dynamic in my office with the mom and the child there, I'm like, do you wake up in the morning and want to make her cry? And they're like, no. I said, but you do it. I said, why do you do it? And they go, I don't know. And the reason they really don't know, because it's not will driven.
Right.
It's brain driven.
Right.
And, so the first thing is you have to take away the drug, right? Conflict and being angry is the drug. You have to take that away. And initially they get worse and then they get better. But as soon as they get you to snap, to yell, to hit them, whatever, they're going to do it again.
Interesting. Yeah, it's this fascinating dynamic. If you grow up with it, it's very...
And so don't feed the beast. That's the first thing. Get them help if you can. One of the ways to calm down the excitement, conflict-seeking behavior is exercise. Exercise can make a big difference. Magnesium can also help because it tends to settle things down in the brain. It actually tends to balance the brain magnesium, better. And if they have untreated ADD, please get it treated.
Yeah, so after my mom got scanned and she saw her brain and she got treated, she was so funny. It was like the first time in my life I would call her, and I love my mom, but I did move out of the house pretty early. Because I'm very anxious, so I don't like that kind of drama, and I grew up with it, and there's a point where you just are done.
And there was sort of drama in her relationships.
Anyways. So I was just kind of done. And I love my mom, and I was always close to her, but I didn't really want to be that close to it anymore. So we talked every day, whatever. But I always knew that when I talked to her, I'd have to put her on speakerphone, set it down, be doing stuff, give her 10 minutes to just sort of vent about whatever drama was going on. And then I would interrupt and go, hey, Mom, I only have a little while and I want to be able to talk to you. But I had to give her that little bit of time to sort of vent that drama. Well, she gets treated for the ADD, and all of a sudden I'd call her and I'm like, hey, how are you? She's like, I'm fine. I'm like, excuse me? I'm like,
well, don't you remember your mother and your uncle worked together?
I will.
And so they both had ADD. ADD runs in families. Right. And I treated both of them, and they stopped complaining about
each other. But I would, all of a sudden I'm like, you're like, what? Everything's like, you're good? She's like, yeah, and she almost sounded like she didn't know what to say. Like a little bit bored. And it was really funny. And at one time she even said, she goes, I just find myself being a little bit tired. Like, she goes, I don't have like the same level of energy I had. She goes, but I'm getting so much done. And I just died. And that was when I actually started to believe in ADD for real. Like I was...
So if you stay with us, we're going to walk through ADD and how to know if you or a loved one has. Stay with us. So how do you know if you have ADD? There's so many myths and misconceptions about
like
ADD.
this topic.
I was on the radio this morning, and this woman was talking about her 24-year-old daughter who was starting to take stimulants. And she starts off with, well, unfortunately, she saw this doctor who diagnosed her with ADD, and she just was really negative about it, which many people in society are. And by the end of our call, she was, I can support her much better. Because having untreated ADD is associated with so many bad things. And
I have to tell a story. Well,
apparently I have no choice.
Because you just reminded me. I mean, I'm working firsthand with somebody who we've been working with for a long time. And, it's a process sometimes. Sometimes it's a process because there are many things going on with some people. Some people have ADD, but they've also got, dear Lord, emotional trauma or bipolar or who knows. Okay. Like so many people have so many things going on. So it's this process of, unlayering it, sort of uncovering what's going on with the person and dealing with the most critical things first. But in dealing with this person, I think we both suspected the ADD early on. We both kind of knew that it was there, but we had to deal with the most critical things first. And then finally, as I was dealing with her and I suspected, I heard something that really scared me because it reminded me of someone in my childhood that I just always was failing and was an addict and kept going back to drugs because they felt like a failure. And I heard something in her voice that I knew that if we did not, like if she felt like a failure, she had just finally gotten a job, and I knew that if she failed at this job, she was going to like fall off completely and it was just going to devastate her. And so I called you and I'm like, this can't wait. Like we need to take care of this now. Like this is just a problem. I don't know what you need to do, but you need to do something right now. You need to fix this. so I dragged you over there.
This is the dynamic in our relationship.
Yeah.
She finds a puppy that needs to be fixed,
Right.
and she goes, "You fix it."
Right. But I bring the puppy home and then
The strays, yes.
So we go over there. It's like nighttime, and we go over there, and I'm like, I knew this was a problem. So, and you agreed. And so you said, you know what, we're going to treat this ADD. I know that there's ADD. We've been sort of like getting everything else under control first, but now it's time. And so you put her on a stimulant, and some people are great with stimulants and some aren't. That's how your book, Healing ADD, what I love about it is it talks about all the different types of ADD. Everybody is not the same. I'm not the same as, someone else with a different type of ADD. Anyways, she had gotten a job and her self-esteem was just suffering because she could not focus. I kid you not. One day, and everything turned around. And all of a sudden she calls me the next day, I am a rock star. And she literally, that's what she said. She was so excited. She started getting all this like, this reinforcement and positive feedback at work. And then they started like already like moving her to busier shifts and like doing things like this. And then she gets a second job. And I'm like, this is a person who couldn't focus to get through a basic day without a job. And now she's got 2 jobs and she's excelling.
So how does someone know whether or not they have ADD? So the 5 Hallmark symptoms are short attention span, but not for everything. It's short attention span for regular, routine, everyday things, homework, schoolwork, paperwork, chores, the things that make life work. The thing that confuses people is for things that are new, novel, highly stimulating, or frightening. People with ADD can pay attention just fine. And so many people with ADD say, and President Bush said this, the second one, he said, well, I can pay attention if I'm interested. And I like hit my forehead and go, no, not 2 ADD presidents in a row, right? Given Clinton and all the impulse control issues, I'm like, please, not another one. And so it's short attention span, and it's sort of the story of their life for things they don't really want to focus on. Distractibility. They see too much. They hear too much. They sense too much. So where most of us can sort of decrease the distractions around us and focus on what's in front of us, it's like the world comes at them too fast and it distracts them. They're often very sensitive to light, to noise, to sounds, to touch, and it can just really impair their ability to focus. They're often disorganized. If you look at their rooms, their desks, their book bags, their filing cabinets, they're often a mess unless they have the over-focused ADD type. Then certain areas are perfect and other areas are a nightmare. They tend to procrastinate. They put things off until someone's mad at them and they have to get it done. So they need that stimulant.
Right. They need the pressure.
and they tend to be impulsive. Not all of them. The inattentive ADD is not very impulsive, but
What about anxious?
the anxious ADD is less impulsive, but the classic ADD for sure. The prefrontal cortex, so that's the front third of your brain, largest in humans than any other animal. It's less active in people who have ADD, and it's the brain's brake. It stops you from saying or doing things that can get you into hot water. It actually processes, well, what's the consequence if I say this? What's the consequence if I do this? So you think ahead to have control over your impulses. When the prefrontal cortex is low, either because you have ADD or you had a head injury, the thoughts just get out. So when I lecture, I'll often go, how many of you are married? And, half the audience will raise its hand. And I'll go, is it helpful for you to say everything you think in your marriage? And the whole audience busts up laughing because, of course, it's not helpful, right? I mean, we all have weird, crazy, stupid, sexual, violent thoughts that no one should ever hear. But if you're around people who have ADD, they just don't have a filter, and those thoughts get out. Right. Which is why your mom's actually very funny often.
Right. She's
like,
hilarious.
Filter.
Right.
And so if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 of those symptoms, and they've sort of been the story of your life, it's really important to get them treated. And unlike the mother who was so sad, her daughter got diagnosed with ADD and got put on a stimulant, I'm like, if she really has ADD, what's the fallout?
Well, I mean, look at the person I was talking about, the story that I told. That was literally like putting glasses on her for her brain. So like, I've heard you use that analogy, but that's exactly what it was like. And like every day she would call me and she's like, I don't know what's going on. I feel like this is the first time my brain's ever worked right. Like, it was just like, it was a miracle. Like literally, I've never seen anything that extreme. So,
yeah, and I've seen it for 35 years.
It's crazy.
So treating people with it, which is why when I hear all the negative chatter about treating ADD, it's just a mistake.
Now, we should be clear. Not everybody does well on a stimulant.
Not everybody does. That's why I wrote Healing ADD. I talk about 7 different types of ADD. And looking at the study, we talked about head injury. So that could actually be type 8. I've been thinking about that actually for a long time. And now this article was actually published in JAMA Neurology. So really great journal. So not everybody does well on a stimulant. That's why scans can be so helpful. Well, do you have ADD? What type do you have? And how can the scan give us a roadmap to inform our path? And when it works, it just is dramatic in how effective that can be.
So when we come back, I still want to touch on what we talked about in the last episode, which was some of the issues that go on between people who have ADD and either other people, if they couple up with people with ADD, or even if just in normal relationships, if someone with ADD in a relationship, what are some of the dynamics that happen there and how can those best be worked through?
Well, why don't we also talk about ADD in marriage?
Yeah.
I actually wrote a book about ADD in romantic relationships.
Yeah.
I know more about that one than I want to. Stay with us. Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to talk about ADD in intimate relationships. I have, as I said, more experience with this than I want to know, but when in my first marriage, I just felt like I got run over by a truck.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I
had no
I can relate to that.
personal experience with how to deal with the emotional outbursts and
Yeah, and I think that's really important so this is not to demonize someone with ADD. This is because I think if you don't know how to deal with the person who has it, or who is like sort of conflict seeking, then you don't always behave in a way that could be helpful. So I want to really bring that up.
Over time, you end up bitter, you end up angry.
Right.
And one of the problems is the brain has memory.
Right.
And so you're constantly being triggered about, well, this happened, so it's likely to happen again.
So I can tell you in a previous relationship for me, I constantly felt like I was walking on eggshells and trying to figure out, there's this feeling that you have. You're going home and you're like, what's going to happen when I walk in the door? What's going to be the fight tonight? You're anticipating, and you're like, how am I going to handle it? What am I going to say? Like you're like, and you're already walking on eggshells when you walk in, and you're like trying to like position yourself before it even starts. So then when it starts, you're trying to maneuver to get around it. And I have to tell you, for a lot of people, most of us probably, you deal with that for a little while, and then there comes a day where you're like, I'm done. And so you're not so good at dealing with it anymore. You don't walk on eggshells. You start crushing eggshells. so then it's not so...
And not everybody that has ADD has these problems in a relationship.
Right, everybody's different. Because I have ADD.
Because you have ADD.
Right.
And you and I don't have these problems.
No, I don't like
And it's
conflict.
not because I'm better, although I am. Right. I mean, I was really young then. And I know a lot more. But
well, I think we've both learned a lot. But
in my book, Healing ADD, there's a chapter called The Games ADD People Play.
But let me just finish that off, though, too, because it's really important to point that out. There are people with I have ADD, I guess, but... okay,
Do we want to go into that again?
I will own it. But I don't have a lot of the classic signs, and so it's really important for people to hear that, because, like, I don't like conflict. I'm anxious. So I don't like drama in my house. In fact, it almost creates some drama because I will draw such a strong boundary against people bringing drama in my house. It's like, you can't come in my house and do that. So then that makes people all nervous.
Which actually sets a good boundary.
Oh, yeah.
Because then they're less likely to act badly.
Everybody knows if you do that in my house, you're not welcome.
And people with ADD do better with boundaries, and they do better with structure.
Right.
That's why many kids who had ADD end up in the military, and they thrive in the military because they have structure.
Is that why people think I'm militant?
Could be. The rules are really clear and so on. But I just want to highlight some of the games people with ADD play. And the first game is Let's Have a Problem.
Right.
Because they're going to use, left untreated, they will use their partner as a stimulant.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you're having a great vacation, you've been looking forward to it for half a year, the other person just starts picking on the children, or they start picking on their spouse as a stimulant. And they don't know they do it. It's not conscious, but everybody around them knows they do it.
And have you ever seen someone that does that and they will not give up? And so you might not pick up the rope. Don't pick up the rope. Don't pick up the rope. They keep pushing. They're not going to let you not pick up the rope. They keep pushing until you do. And then all of a sudden they're hurt, and it's like they're the victim.
Well, but when you stop, they unconsciously know they can get you to react. And so they keep at it.
Right.
But the more you don't react, the less they will continue the conflict.
Right. Unless
they are over-focused type of ADD where they just can't let go. It's almost like an OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder problem. The second game they play is, I bet I can get you to yell at me or hit me. And this is going to sound terrible. I was chief of domestic violence at Fort Irwin when I was in the Army. And I realized when there was domestic violence in a home, I had to evaluate everybody in the family. Right. And often what I'd find is a dad who had a brain injury, a child or wife who had ADD that was conflict driven, and he couldn't control himself because of the damage to his frontal lobes. And I'm like, this is a family issue. And I'm going to get hate mail for this.
You're going to get hate mail for this.
But, I've always been, let me call it as I see it, is their family dynamics. There are always family things that work into this. And yes, there's never an excuse to have someone hurt, a woman or a child. Never an excuse. for that. But if you don't understand the dynamic and fix everybody,
you can't fix it.
can't properly intervene. The next game they play is my thoughts are more terrible than your thoughts.
Right.
And they actually use
my mom.
negative thoughts. Another one is it's your fault and I'm not responsible. Another one for the over-focused ones, no way, never, you can't make me do it.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I say the opposite of what you say.
Now, see, if I have any of these, that's the, like, if
No,
you
no way,
force
never,
me,
you
yeah, it's
can't,
like,
yeah.
if you tell me I have to do something, you better watch out.
I say the opposite of what you say. I say the first thing that comes to my mind, let's call it even though they started it and, acted really badly. Well, let's call it even. And the last one is fighting as foreplay. So these are people that have this terrible knockdown, drag out fight.
And then, the makeup
and
sex.
then the makeup sex is awesome. But the woman often has trouble having an orgasm because what does an orgasm require? It requires focus. And because people with ADD are often easily distracted, they don't get the focus. And so once you treat them, orgasms go up. So that always makes me happy to contribute to someone's sexual happiness.
That's hilarious.
Always appropriately. So if you find yourself in any of these,
yeah, I find that list fascinating. And as as you're reading that list, I'm like, that's so interesting, especially when you were talking about the dynamics in couples. So you have someone who is conflict driven, but you have someone else who plays that game of, I bet I can make you hit me, or I bet I can make you scream at me. I mean, it's not a popular thought, but there are people who sort of are stuck in that victim role. And that's really sad. It's really important for you to recognize that about yourself, because you can never be happy. You can never be successful if you get stuck in that role.
Well, if you're a victim, you have no power.
Right.
And you can't change anything.
Right.
There's this interesting thing that moms often tell me. If we have a bad morning at home, he has a good day at school. If we have a kind, loving morning at home, then he has a bad day.
That's so bizarre.
Because he didn't get his stimulant.
That's so bizarre.
You just see these chronically conflicted relationships that do so much better. It's almost like the secret that very few people know about, that having untreated ADD devastates relationships, and treating it with diet, with exercise, simple supplements, or medication can make a huge positive difference and decrease the divorce rates.
And I think it's really important to point out that because you have ADD does not mean you're not going to be successful. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person or you're wrong or anything like that. I think that I got lucky early on in life. We talked
about two presidents, I think, have ADD.
Well, and I think I got lucky early on in life with all the chaos and drama that happened in my house. I got lucky early on in life. I did not turn to drugs because of all the drugs that were around me. I turned to exercise, and I don't know why I got that lucky, but somehow that saved me.
Which is one of the best natural treatments.
Right, I didn't know that. I was treating my ADD. I was like obsessed with exercise. But I knew it made me feel good. I knew that it helped me. It made me feel good. But it doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you have to figure out. What I didn't realize is that things could be easier by knowing some of this stuff. I just got lucky that I found that other people find other ways to medicate their ADD that might not be as effective. But that doesn't make you bad.
So how do people do that? So they do it with conflict. They do it with fighting.
Drugs.
They do it with methamphetamines.
Right.
They do it with cocaine. They do
if you're
it with
overfocused and anxious, you might do it with pot.
They do it with pot. They do it with alcohol. They do things that make them feel better fast that clearly doesn't last.
Right. So knowing this can help you, figure out how to make your life work better, not just in a relationship, but then the dynamics are better and you'll be successful at many things. I think the really big key to take away here is that this is something that is treatable. You have to look at it from a different perspective of something other than, oh, this is a bad person, we need to blame that person. If you can get this treated, your entire life, your family, everything's going to be different. It's really interesting. Don't you think?
I love how evolved you have become.
From I don't
that.
believe in ADD.
I'm sitting there so happy. Because when people are in chronically conflicted relationships, rather than blame the other person as bad, because haven't you noticed your friends that are in chronically bad relationships, that their next relationship
Is the same.
And then their next relationship is the same. And the only thing that's consistent across those three relationships
Is that person.
is you.
Right.
Right? And so you have to go, what is attracting me to that? Or what is it I can do different? So if you're married or you're a partner with someone who has ADD and they're not going to go get help, make an appointment for them. Call the clinic. Make sure they show up because they have ADD. So they're not very organized and they don't follow through well. I think it's a family disorder. No question in my mind. It's a family disorder. And if you are the more organized one, and the fun brains that I've seen, one is like classic ADD, low frontal lobes. The other one's got OCD. And initially the opposites attract.
Right.
And then they want to kill each other.
Right.
Then they hate each other. And so the more organized one, if you can sort of organize when they take their supplements or their medicine, don't be bitter about that. Be grateful that there's something that may be helpful in your relationships.
Well, and there is something to be said about fit. I mean, we're talking about relationships here. We just have to like point this out. Even if you've got ADD, there is something to be said about fit. So you have to know that the person you're with is someone you can talk to, that wants to be treated, that will work through this with you.
Right. So I remember this one couple I saw from the state of Washington. He's an emergency room doctor, and he's in my office because his wife read Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And he's like, how can I have ADD? And I'm like, 5 of my best friends have ADD, and they're all doctors. And emergency room doctors have the highest incidence of ADD. And I'm like, well, humor me. How's your attention span? He says, great. And his wife like slugs him. And she goes, you never pay attention to me. I said, how's your organization? He said, it's awesome. And later she sends me a picture. This is his idea of an organized office, which is like an explosion.
Oh my God,
went
it's so
off
funny.
In there. And when we scanned him, he had classic ADD. And treating him, their marriage got so much better. But if it wasn't his wife sort of organizing things and threatening to leave him, because she's like, I knew you weren't going to go. I've already seen a lawyer. I love you, but I'm not staying in this craziness anymore.
Because it is craziness. I mean, it is craziness.
Ended up saving their marriage, which was so special because it actually had a generational impact. They would have gotten divorced, his conflict-driven nature, they'd have fought in court for years, and it just wouldn't have been fun for those poor kids.
Right, and, talking about the past, like the relationship I was in, if that person may have been willing to be treated and seen, that may have been a different outcome, but I wasn't willing to stay. I already grew up in chaos and drama and trauma, and I wasn't doing it anymore. But being with you, okay, I have ADD, but I actually think of my life as being extremely happy, very balanced, loving,
but you
amazing.
Were also willing, when we talked about it and you got scanned, you go, well, I want this better.
And you were
willing to do the things that, were required.
But I always want to be better.
Because you want to be better. You didn't see it as a defect.
No.
You saw it as an impediment to being your best self.
No, you call me a seeker. I'm always going to some seminar or taking like some course or class, or that's not a negative. That's a compliment.
That's a compliment.
Right.
ADD in relationships, they can be so much better. Just don't deny it. Don't put your head in the sand. Otherwise, someone's going to kick you in the butt. Stay with us. Use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or on our supplements at brainmdhealth.com. Thank you for listening to the Brain Warriors Way podcast. Go to iTunes and leave a review, and you'll automatically be entered into a drawing to get a free signed copy of the Brain Warriors Way and the Brain Warriors Way cookbook we give away every month.